Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take complex, essential knowledge and distill it into, well, immediately actionable, strategic insights.
That's the plan.
Today, we are undertaking a really critical deep dive into the L4M1 core material, the scope and influence of procurement and supply. And look, if you or your organization views this function as, just a cost center, the department that buys the paper clips, you are operating with a massive blind spot.
A huge one.
This function is not just about transactions, it's a strategic lever. It's a source of massive organizational and really competitive value.
And that's the core mission today, isn't it? We're unpacking the systems, the processes, the strategies that organizations use to acquire, well, everything.
Everything.
From specialized components for a product to the cloud software that runs the HR department, right up to the construction services that build a new headquarters.
Right.
We want you to walk away with a professional, holistic understanding that procurement fundamentally drives continuity, manages risk, and dictates long-term profitability.
Okay, so let's start by clarifying the vocabulary. Because in the professional world, these terms, you have to use them correctly. What is the fundamental distinction between procurement and supply?
Right, so procurement, at its heart, is the strategic function. It's the comprehensive upstream process.
Upstream.
Yeah, think of it as the planning, the sourcing, the negotiation, the contract management, and then ultimately the ordering and buying of goods or services.
So tangible or intangible.
Exactly. It's the decision-making body that defines the need and then secures the means to meet that need.
And supply, how does that differ?
Supply, or the process of supply, is the physical downstream act. It's the infrastructure, the movement, the logistics that ensure those products or services get precisely from the supplier to the required point of consumption.
So the factory floor or the end customer?
Wherever it needs to go.
Okay, so procurement dictates what we acquire and under what terms. Supply then handles the how and the when of the actual physical delivery. It sounds like procurement initiates the value chain, but without effective supply mechanisms, the procurement decision is, well, it's useless.
Absolutely. They are inextricably linked. But you're right, procurement is the trigger. Without the strategic purchasing, the negotiation, the contracting done by procurement, the supply chain has nothing to move.
Right.
Procurement sets the conditions for all the logistics and value creation that comes after.
With those foundational definitions in place, let's zoom out a bit to the broader context. Supply chain management, or SCM. How does the scope of SCM differ from that specific function of procurement?
SCM is the orchestrator. It's the big picture. It encompasses all organizations and all activities involved in the flow and transformation of goods.
So from the very beginning.
From the initial extraction of raw materials, through all the manufacturing stages, distribution, right up to the end user.
Yeah.
And, crucially, it also includes the flow of all the data and information that goes with it.
Okay.
SCM ensures this entire complex process is managed effectively, optimizing the whole system to reduce total costs, improve efficiency, and add competitive value.
So if I've got this right, if procurement is the expert in negotiating the costs and terms for, say, an engine part.
Yep.
SCM is the expert in making sure the raw aluminum for that part gets mined, refined, shipped, manufactured into the part, delivered just in time to the assembly line, and tracked digitally every single step of the way.
That is the perfect distinction.
Yeah.
And to really grasp the scale of SCM, we need to locate its activities within the global economy, which is, traditionally organized into three key industry sectors.
And procurement professionals are sourcing from and supplying to all three of them constantly.
Constantly.
Let's analyze those three sectors then, because they really define the movement of value. We have to start with the primary sector.
The primary sector is foundational. It's where everything begins. These industries focus on the extraction and gathering of natural resources.
So we're talking about mining, agriculture.
Mining, agriculture, forestry, fishing, oil drilling. Without the output of the primary sector, be it raw cotton, crude oil, or iron ore, the rest of the economy just grinds to a halt.
And the primary sector then hands its output to the secondary sector.
Correct. The secondary sector takes those raw materials and processes them, transforming them into finished products or components. This is the manufacturing heart of the economy.
Automotive plants, construction.
Automotive plants, construction companies that turn steel and cement into structures, textile mills, refineries. Their procurement needs are typically high-volume raw inputs and very complex machinery.
And finally, that brings us to the tertiary sector, the service economy.
Yeah, the tertiary sector provides services, not tangible goods. These businesses facilitate production, distribution, consumption, or they provide direct consumer services.
So insurance, banking, education.
Insurance, banking, education, healthcare, logistics providers, and retail outlets. And while they don't produce physical goods, their procurement needs are immense. They're focusing on intangibles like software, specialized consulting, complex logistics services.
It's the ultimate cradle-to-grave flow, isn't it? A farmer, who is primary, supplies raw grain to a brewery, secondary, which then bottles the beer and sells it through a distributor and a pub chain, which is tertiary.
Exactly. And procurement and supply activities define every single transaction along that entire value stream.
And this structural understanding is so crucial because a disruption in the primary sector, say a flood affecting a harvest, that instantly translates into higher prices and limited supply for the secondary manufacturer.
Which then impacts the tertiary retailer's ability to sell the final product. It's all connected.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the traditional idea of a straight chain is, well, it's misleading. Modern supply is managed through these incredibly intricate supply chain networks, or SCNs.
An SCN moves way beyond a linear flow. It's a dynamic, complex structure with a high degree of interdependence. It's more like a web of interconnected suppliers, manufacturers, logistics partners, IT systems.
All linked by material and information flows.
And often in two directions, which is key.
And within these networks, we see the structure formalized through supply chain tiering. Let's use that classic example of an original equipment manufacturer, an OEM, like a major car company, to explain how this works.
Okay, so tiering simply means organizing suppliers by their proximity to the ultimate buyer. The OEM, the car company, is at the top.
Right.
They buy a finished product, let's say a complete engine system, directly from their Tier 1 supplier. T1s are often large, globally capable firms that manage really complex integration.
But the T1 supplier can't possibly make every single component themselves. They need inputs.
Exactly. The T1 supplier, the one providing the engine, has to source parts for that engine. Pistons, turbochargers, electrical sensors from Tier 2 suppliers.
And it goes deeper.
It does. Those T2 suppliers might source specialty raw materials like exotic metals or specialized chemicals from Tier 3 suppliers.
So the lower the tier number, the closer the supplier is to the OEM. But the farther down the chain we go, the less direct visibility and, I suppose, the less contractual relationship the OEM has.
And that, you see, is the major inherent limitation of tiering in modern supply chains. The lack of visibility and control over those lower-tier suppliers, T2, T3, and beyond.
Why is that? Why not just manage them all?
Well, many global organizations deliberately focus their contracting resources on the T1s because it's efficient. It lets them manage fewer relationships.
But if the T1 supplier is legally responsible for the final engine quality, why should the OEM worry about what's happening at T3? Why is that lack of visibility such a massive risk factor?
Because risk is rarely just contractual. It's reputational, it's ethical, it's operational. If a T3 supplier operating deep in that chain sources a critical raw material unethically, maybe using forced labor or violating environmental laws, that risk flows straight back up the chain.
Regardless of the T1 contract.
Regardless. The buying organization, the OEM, they face massive reputational damage in consumer boycotts, even if they never wrote a check directly to that T3 supplier.
Yeah, this moves us straight into compliance, ethics, and sustainability risk. And we have to confront the reality that illegal practices, particularly around labor, they persist far beyond that first tier.
We do. We're talking about fundamental human rights issues. The Global Slavery Index reports that tens of millions of people globally are in some form of modern slavery.
That's staggering.
It is.
Yeah.
And procurement professionals have a moral but also a strategic imperative to ensure their supply chains are clean. But due diligence on T1 suppliers alone is it's completely inadequate.
So the due diligence has to be comprehensive across all tiers.
All tiers, no question.
Overcoming this limitation, it must require supply chain mapping and a serious investment in technology and, well, people, right?
Absolutely. The first step is mapping. Identifying every T2 and T3 supplier of critical components. And this process is time-consuming. It often requires you to force your suppliers to disclose their own supply base, which they might resist.
For intellectual property concerns, I imagine.
Exactly. So the organizational strategy has to explicitly state that the cost of not knowing these details far outweighs the difficulty of mapping them. Organizations have to use audits, technology like blockchain tracking, third-party specialists to shine a light into the furthest reaches of their network.
Let's shift our focus to the physical movement of goods, which is where logistics operates. It's the critical backbone that transforms a contracted purchase into a delivered reality. How do we define its scope?
Logistics is it's defined as the process of planning, implementing, and controlling the efficient, effective flow and storage of goods, services, and their related information from the point of origin to the point of consumption.
So it's a vast operational function.
It's huge. It handles warehousing, inbound and outbound transportation, packaging standards, risk management during transit, and ensuring compliance with delivery windows.
And contained within logistics is the management of the physical inventory itself, materials management.
Correct. Materials management is the core functional area that's concerned with planning, handling, storage, inspection, and issuing of all materials. Raw components, finished goods, spares.
And inventory management is a subset of that.
The subset, yes. It's about ensuring stock levels are accurate and maintained to meet forecast demand without incurring those excessive holding costs.
And when logistics fails, the consequences are immediate and, well, they can be dramatic. We have the perfect case study in the UK from 2018, the KFC chicken shortage.
Ah, yes. This is a classic textbook example of a catastrophic logistical failure, and it was directly related to poor strategic change management and a lack of built-in redundancy.
So what did they do? What exactly did they change?
They decided to embark on this massive cost-cutting exercise by changing their logistics model. They switched from a really well-established multi-warehouse distribution model
Run by specialists?
run by specialized food logistics firms, which provided that built-in redundancy and regional expertise. They switched from that to a centralized, single warehouse model run by a new partner, DHL.
And the decision was driven purely by cost savings.
Purely by the projected cost savings of consolidating operations.
And what was the operational limitation that just immediately surfaced?
DHL's capacity, and critically its specialized IT systems, were just not ready for the scale and complexity of managing a national chilled food supply chain. The single distribution center was overwhelmed almost immediately.
Wow.
Routes couldn't be planned, trucks sat idle, and the vital cold chain requirements for fresh chicken just broke down.
So the logistical failure meant hundreds of KFC outlets across the country had to close, sometimes for days or even weeks.
The fallout was immense. It was financially damaging, profoundly embarrassing, and it caused massive reputational harm. The public ridicule was intense, and it became a global headline about the fragility of modern, consolidated supply chains.
So the core limitation revealed here was a static, single point of failure.
A single point of failure driven by aggressive cost reduction that sacrificed operational resilience.
And overcoming this limitation, it demanded a complete reversal of strategy, I assume.
It did. The key strategic shift was moving from that static, single point concept to a flexible, distributed supply chain network. They had to rapidly re-engage previous logistics partners, building redundancy back into the system using multiple distributed warehouses.
So the ultimate takeaway is that resilience, the capacity to absorb and respond to shock, has to be prioritized over the absolute lowest immediate cost.
Always. And we see that flexible approach constantly evolving today. Things like third-party logistics, distributed inventory models, where companies actively utilize external partners, sometimes even competitors, to share warehousing capacity.
Right, to ensure constant supply capability. It guarantees fast, reliable service, and it dramatically reduces the risk of that sort of systemic collapse KFC suffered.
It illustrates perfectly that successful logistics isn't about moving materials cheaply. It's about minimizing the risk of supply failure, which is always, always more expensive in the long run.
That brings us to the transactional core of procurement. For any procurement professional, success is universally defined by satisfying the 5 rights of procurement. What are these fundamental principles?
The 5 rights are the benchmark for achieving true value for money in any acquisition. Procurement professionals have to ensure delivery of the right quantity, right quality, right time, right place, and the right price.
And they're not separate, are they? They're interlinked.
Fully interlinked. A failure in securing one right will invariably compromise the achievement of the others.
Okay, let's start with the right quantity. This seems simple on the surface, but getting the quantity wrong is a fundamental risk to profitability.
It is. The limitation here is balancing 2 opposing risks. Running out of stock, versus having too much stock or overstock.
Right.
Ordering too few goods risks production stopping, which is extremely costly, or just failing to meet customer demand. But ordering too many leads to higher warehousing costs, inventory carrying costs, potential obsolescence, and it ties up working capital.
So the goal isn't just ordering the number you need today, but leveraging economies of scale without creating this undue financial burden.
Precisely. Procurement has to negotiate volume discounts, achieving those economies of scale, while balancing that saving against the total cost of holding the inventory. This involves complex forecasting and robust inventory management systems to determine the economic order quantity, the EOQ.
Next, the right quality. Quality is just non-negotiable for achieving value. It has to meet the technical needs and the ultimate expectations of the end customer. So how do organizations formally define this quality standard for their suppliers?
Quality assurance is defined through two main methods. First, referencing external standards, and second, creating precise product specifications.
Okay, let's start with standards.
For standards, the most internationally recognized framework is ISO 9000. And this is not a specific product quality standard, it's a globally recognized standard for quality management systems.
So it's about the process.
It's about the process. By requiring a supplier to be ISO 9000 compliant, you are ensuring they have the processes and controls in place to maintain consistent quality over time.
And the more detailed approach is the product specification.
Yes, the product specification dictates exactly what is being procured. This document has to include comprehensive details. A textual description, technical drawings, material composition, packaging instructions, and the specific quality tolerances required.
And this usually involves collaboration between procurement, engineering, and the end-user department.
It has to make sure the requirements are both feasible and adequate.
Now, here's where procurement faces a strategic limitation regarding quality, isn't it? The choice between a conformance specification and a performance specification. That choice determines the level of competition and innovation you'll get.
That decision is vital. A conformance specification is restrictive. It details the product exactly. This is specific chemical formula, the exact components, the precise dimensions. You're dictating how the supplier must make the item.
And the limitation of that tight control, what's the downside?
It severely limits supplier competition and innovation. If you mandate the exact recipe, suppliers can't propose a cheaper, more efficient, or technically superior alternative they may have developed. It locks you into a prescribed solution, and you often miss out on market advances.
So if an organization is focused on finding new market solutions or wants to drive down long-term costs through supplier ingenuity, they should move to a performance specification.
Absolutely. A performance specification focuses solely on the output requirements, what the product or service needs to do, rather than prescribing how to make it.
Give me an example.
Instead of ordering a specific chemical compound you might specify, we need 3 liters of clear liquid that achieves a specific cleaning standard, operates safely between 5 and 45 degrees Celsius, and breaks down biologically within 24 hours.
That opens the field right up.
Yeah.
So the advantage here isn't just greater competition, it's the opportunity for suppliers to introduce true innovation.
Exactly. They can apply their expertise to solve your problem in the most efficient way possible, potentially giving you a massive marketplace advantage.
So you overcome that limitation of restricted competition by using conformance only when you absolutely have to, when regulatory or safety standards demand zero variation.
Precisely.
We arrive, finally, at the right price. While we list it last, we know it's a function of the other 4 rights. So how does procurement strategically influence price to ensure they're achieving true value?
Achieving the right price is fundamentally about leveraging market dynamics and internal discipline. The mechanisms are sort of threefold: effective sourcing, aggregation of spend, and skillful negotiation, particularly around contractual terms.
Let's elaborate on aggregation of spend, because this is a powerful, though organizationally complex, cost reduction strategy.
Aggregation is the process of combining procurement requirements across different departments, different business units, or even subsidiary companies within the same parent organization.
So you're creating a bigger pile of demand.
A much bigger pile. By pooling these requirements, procurement creates much larger volumes, which instantly grants greater negotiation leverage and access to better pricing structures. It's economies of scale on steroids.
But I imagine this faces institutional hurdles. It sounds great on paper, but getting siloed departments or, independently operating subsidiaries to pool their spending can be a real challenge.
That is the limitation of aggregation. It requires intense internal coordination, and it often confronts organizational friction. Imagine a large global conglomerate. The procurement team has to first normalize the data.
What do you mean by that?
Are both the French and U.S. offices buying the same commodity, even if they call it by different names or use different invoicing systems? Then you face internal politics. The U.S. subsidiary might insist their local supplier offers better support, even if the group price is higher.
So the procurement team has to act as internal diplomats, proving that the overall value to the group outweighs that local convenience.
Exactly. Take the example of a global parent company that owns both a manufacturing division and a chain of retail banking offices. They might both require printing services,
Okay.
one for labels and manuals, the other for marketing flyers and envelopes. By aggregating this spend across the entire group, procurement can go to the market with a massive printing contract, achieving rates that neither subsidiary could get alone.
Despite the complexity of integrating their ordering systems.
Exactly. That organizational discipline is essential for the savings to materialize.
Beyond aggregation, negotiation is key. And not just the unit price. You have to focus on the crucial hidden costs tied up in Incoterms.
Understanding Incoterms, the international commercial terms, is non-negotiable for international procurement. They're standardized terms that define the precise point, using globally recognized three-letter acronyms where the risk, responsibility, and cost of the goods transfer from the seller to the buyer.
And if you ignore them, you fundamentally misunderstand the right price.
You do.
Let's use the two extreme examples to clarify the impact of Incoterms on the total cost. Let's do EXW versus DDP.
Okay. When a supplier quotes you EXW, X works, that price is the lowest possible raw price because the seller's responsibility ends literally at their factory gate.
Right there.
Right there. The buyer assumes all risk and cost from that moment. Loading the truck, local customs clearance, main freight, insurance, and arrival customs duties. The total cost to the buyer will be significantly higher than that sticker price.
And if you choose the supplier who quotes DDP, delivered duty paid,
the DDP price will be substantially higher. And why? Because the seller arranges and pays for everything. The main freight, all insurance, all import duties, right up until the goods arrive at the buyer's named place.
Yeah.
The seller carries the maximum cost and the maximum risk.
The insight here is crucial then. If a procurement professional compares an EXW quote of, say, $2 to a DDP quote of $2.50, they might incorrectly choose the EXW supplier.
They might.
But the hidden costs involved in managing the freight, the insurance premiums, the customs brokerage for that EXW option, might cost the organization another 75 cents per unit.
Making the DDP option the cheaper and simpler choice in reality.
Absolutely.
The decision hinges on the buyer's internal logistical capability. If you have poor internal customs or freight expertise, choosing EXW creates massive risk and hidden cost.
So understanding Incoterms is vital for accurately calculating the true total cost of acquisition, not just the raw purchase price. Yeah. That discussion on Incoterms leads us perfectly into the strategic depth required of procurement professionals, moving beyond the sticker price to analyze the true long-term cost. We've established that focusing only on the purchase price is a massive operational limitation.
It's the trap of short-term thinking. That initial purchase price is just one component of the overall expenditure. We need to distinguish between two costing methodologies. First, the short-term focus, the total cost of acquisition, or TCA.
And that includes immediate costs like purchase price, freight, installation.
Exactly. Then we have the strategic long-term view. Whole life costing, WLC, often called total cost of ownership, or TCO. This is the key to strategic sourcing.
And what does that entail?
WLC is the methodology that analyzes the total costs incurred over the entire anticipated lifetime of an asset or AVAC, from initial acquisition right through to the end of its useful life and disposal. It's the difference between buying a cheap asset that costs a fortune to run and a high-quality asset that provides superior long-term value.
Let's visualize this using the famous iceberg effect. The purchase price is only the visible tip of the iceberg floating above the waterline.
Exactly. And that visible cost might be only, say, 20% of the total expenditure. The remaining 80% is hidden beneath the waterline.
What's down there?
For a piece of industrial machinery, these hidden costs include routine and non-routine maintenance, the cost of specialized spare parts, energy consumption, the running costs, insurance premiums, operator training, and eventually the cost of safely dismantling and recycling the asset at the end of its life.
So if a procurement team focuses only on TCA, they might acquire a piece of equipment that is cheap initially, but requires proprietary spare parts that cost 10 times more than standard alternative, or uses 3 times the electricity of a competitor model.
And that cheap purchase is now a long-term liability. Precisely. WLC is the antidote to that liability. Furthermore, this approach is integrated into whole-life asset management, WNLM, which ensures that procurement decisions align with the organization's long-term performance monitoring and eventual disposal strategy.
Is there institutional resistance to WLC? I mean, if the purchase price is in this year's capital expenditure budget, but the maintenance costs are spread across the next 10 years' operational budgets, surely the finance department might resist a high initial WLC investment.
That is a critical institutional hurdle, and procurement must overcome this siloed budgeting approach. The way to overcome this limitation is through rigorous, data-driven analysis that proves the long-term return on investment.
The ROI.
Procurement has to collaborate with finance and operations to demonstrate, for example, that an extra $50,000 in CapEx upfront translates into $200,000 saved in OpEx running costs and maintenance over 5 years.
So you have to move beyond departmental budgets to look at enterprise-wide value generation.
You have to.
So we've covered monetary value, how to reduce total costs through WLC and aggregation. But value is often non-monetary. What are the key non-monetary drivers of added value that procurement has to be looking for?
Added value encompasses anything that enhances the organization's reputation, improves the final product's features, or gives the buyer a sustainable marketplace advantage. We look specifically at additional features, brand and reputation, excellence of service, innovation, and market development.
Let's focus on innovation. How does a supplier delivering innovation translate into measurable added value for the buyer?
Innovation provided by the supplier is arguably the most powerful non-monetary driver. This means the supplier introduces a new process, a new material, or a unique technology that enables the buyer to either save money down the line or, crucially, create a new product that beats competitors to market.
Right.
For example, a supplier might innovate a lighter, stronger material for a consumer electronics company. That allows the company to release a superior product with lower shipping costs, directly translating innovation into competitive advantage and increased profit.
And excellence of service, that seems harder to quantify.
It is, but it's about reliability and proactive support. Excellence of service means the supplier consistently goes above and beyond the minimum contract requirements. They are attentive to your unique problems, they offer solutions before being asked, and they demonstrate flexibility in the face of unexpected changes.
And all of that builds relationship capital, reduces the buyer's internal management time, lowers the risk profile.
All non-monetary but strategically crucial elements of value.
And these non-monetary drivers, they directly contribute to brand and reputation. If procurement insists on working only with ethically sound, innovative suppliers, that reputation becomes part of the final product's value proposition to the consumer.
Precisely. Procurement ensures that every supplier relationship, every contract, reinforces the public image the organization wants to project.
Speaking of reputation, we have to address the massive strategic opportunity and limitation posed by sustainability and ethics. Procurement must achieve value for money while minimizing risks related to environmental, social, and governance factors. ESG.
Sustainability is no longer optional. It's a core strategic requirement. We are moving toward models that ensure procurement doesn't compromise the needs of future generations for current demands. This is where that visibility limitation we discussed earlier in tiering becomes a profound ethical risk.
Let's detail the chocolate industry case study. This perfectly illustrates the difficulty in scaling collective ethical efforts, even with well-intentioned corporate social responsibility initiatives.
The 2018 Chocolate Barometer Report, among others, demonstrated a systemic failure to address core issues in cocoa supply chains, particularly in West Africa. Despite years of CSR campaigns and pledges, the fundamental problem of child labor and devastating deforestation had not been solved.
In some cases, it was getting worse.
In some metrics, the situation was worsening, with millions of children still involved in the supply chain.
So what was the primary limitation that caused these massive CSR efforts to fall so short?
The primary limitation was the inherent flaw in the pricing structure.
Mm.
The extreme economic hardship of the smallholder cocoa farmers, the very base of the primary sector, meant they simply could not afford sustainable labor practices or forego income from clearing forests.
So if the price procurement pays for cocoa beans doesn't guarantee a living income for the farmer, then sustainability is impossible. The efforts were focusing on auditing compliance rather than solving the systemic economic root cause.
So overcoming this limitation requires more than just voluntary audits. It requires a radical commitment to a different pricing model and mandatory human rights due diligence across all tiers.
Absolutely. The solution is industry-wide change, committing to paying a guaranteed living income floor price for farmers, mandating human rights checks that extend deep into the T2 and T3 levels, and achieving absolute transparency in sourcing. Procurement has to strategically decide that the cost of ethical raw materials, even if it's higher initially, prevents a far greater risk of reputational collapse and potential regulatory sanction. This entire discussion feeds directly into risk management. Procurement has to be proactive in identifying potential supply issues, be they ethical violations, material shortages, or geopolitical conflict disruption, and developing mitigation strategies. How do organizations formalize this process?
They utilize a risk matrix. This is the standard tool used to classify, prioritize, and manage identified risks. Risks are plotted against two critical dimensions: the likelihood of the risk occurring and the effect on the organization.
The potential impact.
The potential impact, yeah, ranging from minor disruption to an existential crisis.
And based on that plot, the risk is classified as low, medium, high.
Exactly. For example, a political coup in a supplier's country might be assigned a low likelihood but an extreme effect if that country provides a monopoly on a critical material. That classifies it as an overall high or extreme risk.
Whereas a minor delivery delay might be high likelihood but minor effect,
classifying it as low. This process ensures resources are allocated to managing the most threatening risks.
And these identified risks and their corresponding mitigation plans are formally recorded in the risk register.
Precisely. The risk register is the central document that tracks potential supply issues, details the strategies developed to counter or mitigate them, like sourcing an alternative supplier or holding strategic buffer stock, and it assigns ownership for monitoring that risk. Proactive risk management is essential for business continuity.
Okay, let's shift gears to the internal operational side of procurement. To manage cost effectively, organizations need a framework for categorizing what they buy. This classification is the foundation of strategic spending control.
Right. Understanding your cost structure allows procurement to apply the right sourcing strategy. We categorize all organizational costs primarily across three dimensions: fixed versus variable, direct versus indirect, and capital versus operational.
Let's integrate the first two pairings into a strategic framework: fixed versus variable costs and direct versus indirect costs.
Fixed costs do not change with the output volume. These include items negotiated by procurement, like long-term lease payments for facilities, high-level management salaries, or annual software licenses.
And variable costs.
They change directly with the volume of production. This is the bulk of raw materials, hourly production wages, and component parts. Procurement's focus here is on securing the best unit price and managing volatility.
Now, overlaying that, we have direct and indirect.
Direct costs are expenditures explicitly traced to a specific product, job, or contract. For a construction firm, the cost of the steel beams and the specialized welder's labor are direct costs. Procurement of direct materials requires exceptional quality control and reliable delivery.
And indirect costs are the overheads.
The overheads, costs necessary for the business but not directly attributable to a single product. The salary of the head office cleaning staff, utilities for the admin block, marketing spend. These are often harder to control and require strategic management, often through aggregation.
The complexity comes when a cost is, say, both variable and indirect, like temporary office cleaning staff, or fixed and direct, like the loose on a dedicated piece of production machinery. Procurement has to classify and manage all of those permutations.
Yeah, absolutely. The classification dictates the strategy. You manage a high-volume variable direct material cost, like aluminum feedstock, through strategic hedging and multiple suppliers, whereas you manage a fixed indirect cost, like the global insurance premium, through long-term contracting and centralized aggregation.
And finally, we have capital purchases versus operational expenditures, CapEx versus OpEx.
Capital purchases, CapEx, are high-value, large-scale acquisitions intended to be used over many years. Land, buildings, major machinery, high-end IT infrastructure. These are investments.
And critically, they are the costs to which the whole life costing methodology applies most rigorously.
Absolutely. And operational expenditures, OpEx, are the everyday running expenses: utilities, maintenance, consumables, rent, wages. They are essential for running the business day to day. Procurement manages both, but the approval processes, financing, and valuation methods differ significantly between the two.
A well-negotiated contract based on WLC secures the deal, but a contract is just a promise. How do we ensure the supplier actually delivers the 5 rights consistently over the life of that relationship? That's the job of key performance indicators, KPIs.
KPIs are measurable targets used to monitor, evaluate, and manage supplier performance and ensure the rights of procurement are met and maintained. A robust contract has to establish clear, enforceable standards related to quality, delivery requirements, quantity, price consistency, and compliance with law. KPIs link directly to these contract terms.
And we categorize KPIs into two distinct types based on how the performance is quantified: quantitative and qualitative.
Quantitative KPIs are objective, measured in numbers, and easily tracked via data systems. These address the measurable output. Examples include the percentage of deliveries that are on time, the average number of defective items per shipment, or the average invoice accuracy score. They are efficient for measuring speed and volume.
And qualitative KPIs capture the softer, more subjective elements of the relationship.
Exactly. Qualitative KPIs are descriptive and often based on professional assessment, stakeholder feedback, or opinion. They focus on the manner and the effectiveness of the service delivery. Examples include the measured improvement in the quality of the supplier's technical support, the effectiveness of their responsiveness, or stakeholder satisfaction ratings regarding communication.
So they ensure the value of the relationship beyond just the numbers is monitored.
Yes.
What are the key benefits of using a strong set of balanced KPIs?
They deliver alignment. KPIs lead to improved supplier motivation because expectations are crystal clear. They strengthen communication, leading to smoother buyer-supplier relationships, and they ensure both parties are working towards shared strategic objectives.
But there's a significant limitation of using KPIs, particularly when they are too narrowly focused on the quantitative side.
The critical limitation is that suppliers often engage in sub-optimization. They may rush to meet a single measurable metric like achieving 100% on-time delivery at the expense of the right quality.
So they're shipping a substandard product just to hit the clock.
Exactly. And internally, teams may focus solely on their own KPIs, creating silos that undermine overall organizational goals.
This sounds like a strategic pitfall that procurement must actively manage to avoid a repeat of that KFC scenario, where speed was sacrificed for overall resilience.
Absolutely. The strategic solution is to create and manage a balanced scorecard of KPIs. This means balancing speed metrics, the quantitative side, with qualitative measures of integrity and satisfaction. You pair the on-time delivery rate with reduction in customer quality complaints and supplier innovation score.
So this holistic approach aligns the supplier's goals directly with the buyer's requirement for sustainable, long-term, high-quality value.
And it overcomes that tendency towards short-term optimization.
Okay, let's unpack this for the final time and connect the strategic dots we've laid out. We started by establishing that procurement is the strategic engine that initiates and drives the entire supply chain network.
Impacting the global flow of value from primary extraction to tertiary services.
We covered the necessity of effective supply chain management to reduce total costs and add value. And we learned that value for money requires mastering the 5 rights, but sophisticated organizations have to look deeper than the surface transaction.
And looking deeper means moving beyond the immediate purchase price, the short-term total cost of acquisition, to embrace whole-life costing. We visualize this as the iceberg effect.
Right, understanding that the true long-term costs of maintenance, energy, and disposal are the majority of an asset's expenditure. And overcoming the limitation of short-term budget bias means using rigorous WLC analysis to drive those long-term strategic decisions.
We also identified the primary limitation in complex supply chains, visibility beyond the first tier. This exposure to risk, be it ethical failure like modern slavery in the chocolate industry or operational failure like the single point of logistics failure at KFC.
It requires comprehensive due diligence and robust risk management.
Formalized through tools like the risk matrix.
And finally, we detailed how operational excellence requires strategic control of spending through sophisticated cost categorization and meticulous management of external partners. We learned that the critical limitation of relying on simple KPIs can lead to sub-optimization.
And the antidote is a balanced scorecard approach that prioritizes both quantitative speed and qualitative excellence to ensure sustainable, holistic performance.
This deep dive has really demonstrated that procurement and supply management is inherently strategic, complex, and deeply ethical.
It's about managing relationships and ensuring long-term ethical sustainability across a global network.
And this raises an important question for you to mull over. If procurement is responsible for managing ethical compliance and resilience deep within the supply chain, and as the chocolate industry showed, true ethical compliance often requires paying a premium to guarantee a living income for the furthest removed farmer. How far down the tiers does an organization's mandate for ethical pricing extend? And at what point do we need global regulation rather than corporate choice to ensure that the commercial benefit doesn't override fundamental human rights?
It's a challenge to ponder.
It is. And it's something to think about as you start applying this new level of understanding to every good and service you encounter.